Welcome to the first episode of 312, the HRP Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Simmons. Who's HRP? Well, we're an engineering firm, we're an environmental consulting firm, we're a health and safety firm, but we're much more than just the services we provide. And the 312 Podcast is going to explore exactly what that means. Each month we'll take a look at what HRP does and who HRP is. We have an internal motto here: work hard, play hard. I know that sounds like something you'd see painted in script on a piece of wood in Bed Bath & Beyond. I actually have that exact thing sitting at my desk. But at HRP, it's not a cliche, it's a way of life. To show you what we mean, we structured each episode of the podcast into two sections. The first section you'll hear is Work Hard, where you'll get to know the services that HRP has to offer. In the Play Hard section, we'll sit down with employees and sometimes guests and get to know each other a little better. On this episode of 312, we have a very special conversation with our friends from Elysian Medical Distribution. We have our first check-in with Alicia Washington, Marketing Director and Director of JEDI and ERG. We'll get into the details of that title. Then in our Play Hard segment of the podcast, we'll get the origin story of 312. I'll be joining our friends from Elysian for a less formal conversation. We'll hop from our friends at Elysian to a 312 hangout with myself, CFO Joe Cardinale, and Creative Manager Everett Anderson. Finally, we'll close out today's episode with a brief reflection on what 312 really means to HRP. Many of you out there may be on your way to see family for the holidays, and many of you are probably not able to. COVID-19 is one of the many areas where HRP works, creating preparedness plans, overseeing decontamination, making sure work sites are safe, and connecting our clients to COVID-19 testing products. One way we do that is our work with our friends at Elysian. Here's Eric Retzlaff of EMDi giving a quick rundown of the company.
So Elysian Medical Distribution was founded to help support some of our investment banking clients who couldn't get certain supplies as a result of COVID disrupting marketplaces. So we were kind of dragged into this marketplace to help our existing clients. We found ourselves in a situation whereby we were able to aggregate different manufacturers and provide tools to help combat COVID and be part of the solution of supplying our clients and then expanding that to organizations that had not been our clients to help them better prepare and fight COVID.
We'll hear more from Eric shortly as we introduce our first segment, a conversation with
Eric Retzlaff, Managing Director, Elysian Medical Distributors.
Garfield, Drummond. I'm Executive Vice President, Operations with Elysian Medical Distribution.
Sean Malin. I'm a Regional Manager with HRP Associates.
where we'll talk about COVID testing kits, types of COVID testing methods, the approval process, and what's on the horizon when it comes to vaccines. We go now to Sean Malin, HRP's Regional Office Manager for the Carolinas, who hosts the conversation.
Eric, why do you think there's so much confusion in the general population in regards to the validity of the results of all of these different types of tests? Whether you're talking about an antibody test or an RT-PCR test, you don't have to have too many conversations before you hear somebody tell you a story of how their test was phony or the results got thrown out. How would you explain the collection method strategies and how, is it really the test itself or is it the method with how the sample is collected? Can you provide us some color on that?
Sure. I think some of the variability in the sensitivity and specificity, which in common nomenclature would be called accuracy. It's not a scientific or a medical description, but it's what everybody uses. And we all remember the popular press remarks regarding the governor of Ohio, who tested positive and then subsequently tested negative. And when you get those kind of stories that hit the press, one of the things they don't talk about is A, what collection method was used, B, what test was used, C, who applied and sought the sample. So in some of the tests, the collection methods I would describe as not being comfortable, something you wouldn't want to seek to do on a routine basis. The deep nasal swab, which I have had done to me, is again something I hope never have to have done to me again. And there is a whole school of thought that says if you're going to have someone take a sample from you in the cases where you can't do it on your own, you want to find someone who doesn't like you. Because if you find someone who likes you when you're cringing and your eyes are watering, aka you're crying, they will typically stop collecting the sample. But they may not yet have the sample they need to get the exact result that you're seeking. So sampling method is a big thing. If it's deep nasal, that's arguably the most invasive, maybe followed by deep oral, something we call the tonsil tickle. That creates the gag reflex. It's not a happy thing. And then there's the finger prick, which is actually painless. I've done that many times, but it's poking a little tiny hole in your finger, so it's a scary thing to do. Collection method becomes a huge deal with respect to accuracy. We also recently saw the state of Nevada arguing that they would not use the tests that the federal government was sending them because that they felt that they were not accurate enough, even with a proper collection method. The federal government made them do the tests, made them accept them, only to find out 2 weeks later that the state of Nevada was right. The tests are not accurate enough for their protocol. So we are still in a period, I think, where the science has not been proven on most of COVID. Peer review, we haven't had time for peer review. We haven't had time to have adequate time to assess everything. We're in a global emergency with this pandemic. Everyone is doing the best they can as fast as they can, but it leaves a lot of gaps. And that's why you'll see articles every day that contradict articles from the day before. And these are from reputable news organizations who arguably have checked their sources, double-checked their sources. Yet, as we've all seen also in the press, there are medical doctors who are contradicting each other almost minutely on the news, either because of political persuasion or because of ignorance or because lack of peer-reviewed articles.
So if I went in and got a nasal swab up in the sinuses as opposed to right around the nostril there, and I told you that I had COVID symptoms and I wasn't feeling too well, but I went and I got a PCR test with the nasal swab and it wasn't too bad, and they said I was negative, what would be your knee-jerk reaction when I gave you those clauses and that amount of information? What would you think about the validity of the test that I experienced?
I would not have a knee-jerk reaction to that because it's those knee-jerk reactions that lead to the press statements that you see, right? Every case is a different case. The expectation for society is that we are going to have perfect results, perfect testing in this imperfect world that we're in. And it goes back to the statement that we made earlier in that no single test is going to be a panacea. It's not the silver bullet. We have to use clinical information along with the combination of tests to come up with, to formulate the final answer. So it's upon us to understand that there could be a variety of reasons why the scenario you just mapped out, Sean, might net result A today and net result B tomorrow, but it shouldn't take away from the fact that overall, when you're deploying a consistent strategy, that you're going to be able to address and catch most of these infections. That should be the overall objective.
And let me add that a false positive is as dangerous as a false negative. And most people worry mostly that they get tested and it says, oh, I'm fine, but in fact they are not. The alternative case has been established and unfortunately experienced by nursing homes where they gave many of their patients/residents COVID tests that showed positive, and in fact they were false positives, but the nursing homes were accumulating their positive residents/patients in one wing of the nursing home. So the ones that wound up there as false positives unfortunately wound up being real positives later by virtue of proximity to the actual positives. So this is why, and you described it well, Sean, doing more than one test can increase the certainty with which you can operate under vastly.
Yeah, so you're going to see 3 buckets of testing deployed to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. There is the what's commonly referred to as the gold standard, the RT-PCR test, which is a lab process molecular test. There is the rapid response antigen test, which is in a number of instances, it is a rapid test that provides results in under 30 minutes, under 20 minutes, under 15 minutes, depending on the actual device being utilized. For the rapid response antigen test, you will find that can be completed via a lateral flow cassette that gives you a result almost immediately, 10 to 15 minutes. There are some device manufacturers that has somewhat portable equipment that can read these tests in the field. That's sort of one additional layer of complexity. And then you can also administer and process antigen tests in a lab. The key distinction between the antigen test and the RT-PCR test, as I mentioned, the RT-PCR test is a molecular-based test, and it is looking at molecules, amplifying those molecules to get a very precise read-in on the sample collected. The antigen test, it is looking at proteins on the surface of the supposed virus, the sample, to determine if those proteins match up and indicate infection of that sample collected. The rapid antigen test, generally speaking, and I'm not going to use the term accuracy, okay, because you will hear that quite often when describing these tests, and it isn't, pardon the wordplay here, it isn't an accurate depiction and description of the value of those tests. What really matters is sensitivity and specificity, which is respectively monitoring true positives and true negatives of a test. And so where an RT-PCR test is generally in the 99 percentile and above sensitivity levels, the antigen test could be anywhere from 80 plus 82, 85% sensitivity, and there's some on the market that might be at 95% sensitivity. Now, I'm not going to dive too far into the numbers. I probably have already gone too far and have lost a few listeners, but to Eric's point earlier, and I'll get into the antibody test, which is the last category of testing, but to Eric's point earlier, the true value and the true measure of success when deploying any type of testing strategy is not to look at any single one as the silver bullet. You do it once and you resolve all issues. You find the best strategies where there is some utilization of multiple types of tests or increased frequency of tests in that population set. So you can test via PCR, which is the most accurate test on the market, or most sensitive test on the market. And you can test a population set on a Monday, but it doesn't mean that that group will remain uninfected for anyone that was negative on that PCR test come Friday. Because this is not you test once and an individual never has to worry about getting infected or passing along infection. We have to treat this as a battle that you have to constantly attack And we attack by constantly testing and testing and testing again, so that you can isolate and remove infected individuals from that group so that they're not carrying on and infecting others. And real quickly before I overlook the last test strategy, and that's the antibody testing, which is looking at, you'll commonly hear people refer to that as a kind of a rear view look into past infections. But when deployed in sort of concert with some of the other test strategies, and when you're utilizing antibody testing that's looking at a variety of antibodies, the most common ones being the IgM antibody and IgG antibody, you're able to get almost like a 360-degree view of infectiousness, of infected individuals, and appropriate treatment plans for those individuals. The antibody test, also known as the serology test, that is utilizing a blood sample or plasma. And so a simple finger prick, think of the a diabetes test. There's a lot of folks out there that have done diabetes tests, and you do a simple finger prick, blood draw. That's how you collect that sample. For the antibody test, one of the other values in that compounds to create that 360-degree view of individuals being tested for antibodies. The ones that we carry and provide to market, as I mentioned, they are providing indications of two types of antibodies that our body produces in response to COVID-19 infection, one being the IgM antibody and the other being the IgG antibody. And so when we talk about antibody testing, we generally look at it from a trimester aspect, in that there are three phases that you will see when your body is producing antibodies. Phase 1, trimester 1, being IgM only, and so that is the acute phase of infection. You're actively fighting or shedding virus at that point. Trimester 2, your body is producing both the IgM and the IgG antibody, which indicates that you are potentially still infectious during that phase. And then phase 3, which is the IgG only, the convalescent phase, which is a full-on recovery mode. So I'll shift back or reference one of our previous points, in that when we utilize the combination of the three testing methods, you're able to really get that full view of what's happening with the patient. So if you've done a PCR test that is a very good diagnostic tool, really tells you whether an individual has been or is infected with the virus, and they have sat out for 10, 14 days and are now ready to go back to school, back to the workplace, back to society. Antibody tests often play a critical role in confirming that that individual is free and clear of the infectious nature of the virus. So sorry to kind of throw a bunch of things at you in that comment, but antibody testing collection method is blood draw via finger stick. Antigen testing, it's typically done in one of three ways. The two ways that are has already received emergency use authorization are nasal swabs and oral swabs. So deep nose nasal swab, as well as back of the throat oral swabs. And the same applies for PCR testing as well. Again, the big distinction between PCR testing and antigen testing, at least a rapid antigen test anyway, is that PCR tests are always going back to a lab to be processed and analyzed. And depending on the type of antigen testing, that could be done on the spot in the case of rapids, using local machinery for some of the machine-based tests, or sent back to a lab for lab processed antigen testing.
And let me add, Garfield, with respect to the PCR test being 99% plus accurate, along with that, as it seems with everything, there's a downside, which is to say they are so accurate in the way they amplify the patient's RNA material, they can actually amplify dead RNA virus and show the patient to be COVID positive when in fact they are not, and maybe have not been for quite some time. So one of the downsides of being so super accurate and being the gold standard is you can actually wind up with false positives because the accuracy is so great. And so that's again where having multiple ways to test the patient, if it comes up positive in a PCR but they feel fine, the use of an antibody test to see where they are on the antibody spectrum. If they're IgM, first trimester, they still may be infectious. If they're IgM and IgG, they're kind of in that middle trimester and it's waning. And if they're IgG only, then it is generally accepted that they're out of the infection period and they're on the convalescent mode.
What would you guys say to the narrative that, at the time of this recording, we're on the heels of Pfizer, I think was last week, and Moderna was over the weekend or earlier this week. And, folks are probably starting to think, well, we don't need to get tested. My workforce doesn't need to implement a testing strategy because the vaccine is here. There's lots of news about it. And, we're going to just kind of sit back and wait for the vaccine to come out. What would be your response to an opinion like that?
I would say that with respect to the timing and the timing of the vaccine getting to the general public, we might not want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, hope springs eternal, and my goodness, we all do hope that we will have something, next week, and so that we can all get together for the holidays. That would be great. Let's not count our chickens until they're coming off the barbecue is kind of the way I look at it. And so I would say that we can expect / hope for the general public to being vaccinated sometime early summer is what the scientists we listen to. Our chief medical officer thinks that might even be optimistic with respect to how quickly they're going to get the vaccine rolled out to the general population. We've got probably, if we're going to give it to everybody over 4 years old, we've got 300 million people we have to focus on. The Pfizer vaccine has to be shipped at 100 degrees below zero, which is about 9 degrees off of the temperature of dry ice. The Moderna vaccine is a lot more flexible and can be stored in a common refrigerator for up to a month. But there are some significant logistical problems. There's manufacturing problems. And remember, the 94.5% accuracy numbers we were talked about on the Moderna, that was after 7 days of a vaccination. How quickly does the vaccination fade? We all get, many of us get flu vaccines every year. They last 4 to 6 months. How long will the vaccine for COVID-19 last? There is nobody on earth that knows that answer. And with respect to testing, we actually have a test that will tell you, A, whether the vaccine was effective when you got it, but it'll also tell you how long it's lasting. So Garfield mentioned our antibody test, which measures 2 types of antibodies that the human immune system creates when it detects the virus. The second of those is the IgG antibody. If a person got a vaccine today, but they were worried, hey, what if I'm in that 10% that it doesn't help? Well, you could take an antibody test a few days from now, and it would tell you whether or not it took. If you have the IgG antibody, the vaccine worked on you. Now, if you're worried about how long that vaccine is going to last, because it will be different in every human. Every human has a different immune system, a different age, underlying comorbidities. Every person will be different. There will be generalities that will be established over time, but none of us know any of that now. Neither do the people at Pfizer or Moderna know those answers right now. If you were to take an antibody test once a month, you would know if you are still protected. And so we think that, in fact, there will be a great use of the kits going forward. Wouldn't we all like to know, gee, do we still have confidence? A, do we have confidence when we were just given the vaccine that it worked for me, and I'm not in that minority group, but nevertheless? And B, how long does it continue to last? Key information that we're going to need to get back to work, get back to school, and get back to doing the things that make life worth living.
And one of the other factors that should be taken into consideration as we get closer to vaccination of the population, whether vaccination is made available in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, or further out, it isn't an open ticket to let's disregard everything that we have been trying to do as a society over the last 9 months, right? It doesn't mean that we're not wearing face coverings and practicing social distancing where appropriate or wherever possible. It doesn't mean that we aren't administering testing on a routine basis, because this is the key thing that we should consider. Think about today. If you are going to a doctor to get a flu shot, you are not given that flu shot if you are sick with the flu. Let's jump forward with 3, 4, 6 months from now. We're vaccinating the population. You are not going to get vaccinated if you have COVID. Right? It's simple, right? So we need to make sure that we are taking all the steps we can to reduce the spread now. And when the vaccines become available, we get vaccinated and we hope to eliminate the spread entirely.
So, we talked about 3 types of tests here. What kind of supply and demand is EMDi experiencing right now? And do you see a shortage of these any of these particular products? Which ones are highly coveted? Which ones are waiting manufacturing and those types of details?
As we've gone through the pandemic from back in, I'll call it May, when the test kits first became available, there's really been a process of kits becoming available, kits going into shortage, new kits becoming available that are better or have a better testing method, maybe are cheaper. And so there's been a real evolution in the whole kit business in the last, call it 5 or 6 months. Today, what we're seeing is that there are high quality tests that give very reliable results. They're available. If you know who to go to, they're available at reasonable prices, but the manufacturing has not fully caught up with the demand. So there is a supply shortage. You have to know where to get these things, and that solves the problem it solves the supply problem. The states are sometimes scrambling with each other to get access to these kits. There are still some what I would describe as bad actors in the marketplace that make it difficult for the good actors to get satisfaction. I would say that our team spends far more time teaching potential purchasers what the differences are, how to use them, what the right protocols should be. So we wind up feeling a lot more like educators, which, by the way, is a good environment when we're talking to educators because they get that. And I would say that a large portion of our clients, customers, are in fact in the education field, both, as Garfield mentioned, K-12, and then colleges and universities, especially the college and university sports teams. They come to us because they have testing protocols that have been cast on them by the NCAA, and it's very regimented what they must do and how they must do it. And finding supplies of the specific types of kits that they have been directed to use has not been simple up until, golly, just into the last few weeks.
What other, aside from higher education and K-12, you guys mentioned manufacturing. Can you get into the specifics of what type of sectors that you've worked with? Do you see any common threads there, or it's basically people who find their way to you guys?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say that there is any particular common thread. What we're finding, the folks that are coming to us are those that are in, or they find themselves in a situation where if their operations shut down because they've got 3, 4, 5 positives in their population, they're losing tens of millions of dollars per day. So it becomes a critical strategy to deploy so that they can get that early warning and they can isolate and remove positives from their population, thereby not having that negative impact on their bottom line. I think health and safety is obviously one of the drive-in components, right? It's really leading the decision-making policies of the organizations that we're working with. But at the end of the day, finances obviously affects it as well, right? Can an operation maintain profitability if they have lost half of their staff, if they have to shut down for 2 weeks or a month? There's a lot of us, myself included, that we're able to work from home. But a tremendous amount of our economy is based on organizations and individuals that has to show up to an office or show up to a facility and run that business, operate that business. And the folks that are coming to us are those that are in those critical need situations where if there isn't someone present, that business is not functional. When we talk to a lot of the K through 12 school systems, as important as the students are, if 5 students are positive and they have to stay home for 2 or 3 weeks, it's not the end of the world. Most of those schools don't have to shut down if those 5 students have been isolated and they're not continuing to spread the virus amongst the rest of the students and teachers. However, a school that might only have 20 teachers, a small school, if they lose a quarter of their teachers, they may have to shut down. And that creates, again, a domino effect on, that community, not just that school, but the community and everyone around that community. So, I guess the common thread is, organizations that they can't afford to not be operational. Those are the ones that we're having more conversations with than not.
So you guys are supplying a variety of different testing options to academia and employers. When do you think that I will be able to go down to the street to the local pharmacy and pick up my own test for my family? With the incoming administration on the heels of what you just said, Garfield, it sounds like maybe that's closer than it was a couple of months ago.
Yeah, and actually there was a test that was approved yesterday for in-home prescription only, but in-home collection and reading. So it's happening, and that's the nature of the way that FDA is moving. Their focus, I think, shifts. At one point, it was, let's ensure that we have adequate PCR tests out there for the market. As far as approved tests for the market, whether it's actually making its way to users that demand it is another topic. But at my last check, there were, 290 total tests that had emergency use authorization, 225 of which were PCR tests. There was a big emphasis initially on the antibody testing. There are currently 58 antibody tests on the market with emergency use authorization. And then there was a move towards getting more of the rapid antigen tests out there. And there are currently 7 rapid antigen tests, not including the new one that just came out yesterday, which is essentially an antigen test. So I think that is the natural progression that you're going to see. If the FDA, if I were running the FDA, I would certainly make that one of the priorities, as well as making more of the rapid antigen tests available to the market, whether that's in a point of care setting or an in-home setting.
Do you foresee that in-home prescription-based antigen test being administered via telemedicine, or are people going to have to go to their general physician to get the prescription? How's that going to work?
I think it's probably going to be structured where it's telemedicine, right? The whole idea of the in-home testing is to reduce the burden on the healthcare system, and so I can be on a Zoom call or a go-to meeting with my physician, and based on what I've described to them, they might write the prescription, send it to the local pharmacy, pick it up, you go home, take your test, and inside of 30 minutes, you've got the results. What I understand of the current test that's gotten approval is, it's going to be priced, somewhere in the $50 range, which is a pretty pricey test. When will that make its way onto the shelves and be readily available so that everyone that wants it can get it? I think you're gonna see similar issues as we've seen with all of the other tests, where the demand is so great that it might take a while for everyone to gain access to it. Right? It's not just the at-home test that you can envision having a strong and high demand. All of the kits that we have access to, the demand is very, very strong. And, our conversations with the clients and the partners that we're working with is move swiftly, analyze it properly, but the longer you wait, the less likely it is you're going to get access to the kits that you want when you need it.
What's the current wait time right now? I know you have 3 categories of products. I think you guys have 10 different types of tests, or 10 different manufacturers perhaps in general. What's the wait time right now for the average kit? Let's say an antibody kit.
Antibody kits are readily available. So if one of our clients told us this afternoon that they need 10,000 antibody kits, we could get those delivered to them inside of 5 days. Antigen kits, PCR kits similarly. Those are, we have some very good contracts with CLIA high complexity laboratories that perform all of the analysis of samples collected, and those laboratories, and we have multiple, so that we're able to maintain that short turnaround, right? With PCR testing, anything that's administered or processed in a laboratory, what makes that test valuable is the speed in which the results are turned around. If you're waiting 5, 7, 10, 12 days, it's a useless test. So we have multiple contracts so that we can maintain a very short turnaround. We're turning around on average inside of 24 hours. So that's the turnaround. The materials, we don't have any shortage of those. The area that that you see the most or the greatest likelihood of there being shortages is in the rapid antigen test kits. Now, we're fortunate, and again, part of this is in how we plan and how we coordinate efforts with our manufacturers, and how we try to educate our clients on what's available today, what's going to be available next week, so on and so forth, and planning accordingly. Generally speaking, we're able to turn antigen kit orders in 7 to 10 days from the time it's processed in our system, which is pretty good, and that's generally enough time for any organization to adjust and plan and budget and so on.
The FDA approval process can metaphorically be linked to baseball, which is to say when the manufacturer gets up to the home plate, he's got all his testing done, they have all of their results in, and they submit the information to the FDA for an emergency use approval. Once they've done that, they're at first base. And in the olden days, 7 months ago, that would authorize them to sell the product into the marketplace. The FDA has kind of limited that more recently because a lot of companies that knew they would never actually get to second base, they were happy to be at first base because they were allowed to sell the product. So the FDA has tightened up on those rules, and as they did so, they also kicked a bunch of kits out of the marketplace. This is back in June. They kicked out scores and scores specifically of poorly performing tests and said, no, you cannot not only not sell this, but we are pulling it out of the queue for approval. So once again, you get to first base, which means you're now filed with the FDA waiting for the EUA, emergency use approval. Okay, let's say things move along and they go well, you get to second base. That is your EUA. And that is where, of all the kits Garfield has listed here, the vast majority are in that EUA situation where they are authorized to be sold. They've been emergency approved by the FDA. The next way that you want to go is to get to third base, and that's what we call the point of care. That's the kit that was approved today, and it's able to have you do the test at home without a medical professional performing that test on you. And it still takes a prescription, so it's not the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail being when you get back to home base. So you've hit a home run, and that's where you walk into the pharmacy, you go to next to the aspirin, you buy a set of 5 COVID test kits, you take them home, you perform the test on yourself, and it's all said and done. To get from third base to home plate, it's not equidistant as it would be to get from home to first or first to second. It is a much more circuitous route. Doctors like to get paid for what they do and the education that they've gone through, as do pharmacists. If we take them out of the equation and put this on the shelf at the Walgreens, they no longer get paid for everything that they've done. And also it means that whatever that is that's on that shelf, there's going to be extreme price competition for, and prices are going to drop through the floor. And it becomes an entirely new marketplace than waiting for a prescription and paying your copay to get that from your doctor. So that process, we like to think of it like a baseball diamond, and there's steps along the way. And right now, today, we saw the first test kit get to third base. But it's, again, harder to get from third to home, as it is in the baseball metaphor, than it is anything else.
Did Eric just make baseball better by suggesting if you change the distances between the bases, forget the diamond, let's make it a trapezoid, right? Is that the right? Can you imagine how much more interesting the game would be? Like if you had.
You mean it might actually be interesting?
Yes, I think we should stop the cast now. We need to push this. We need to make the trapezoid for baseball.
No, I've always thought they should cross baseball and golf. If you put water hazards and sand traps out there in the outfield, it would be interesting.
Big thanks to Sean, and I take you now to our conversation with Alicia Washington. Good morning, Alicia.
Good morning, Tom.
So you are leading HRP's drive for diversity and inclusion. You've been named the director of JEDI and ERG, in addition to your role as director of marketing here at HRP. And since the topic we're going to discuss today is misconceptions about diversity and inclusion, I thought we could start with your title, because I suspect not everyone will know what those acronyms mean.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. JEDI ERG, as many say. So JEDI stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And ERG stands for Employee Resource Group. So I'm leading the efforts on the Employee Resource Group and helping with the JEDI initiative for HRP.
So we wanted to discuss some myths, I think, around diversity and inclusion. And I think the first one we can kind of talk about is the kind of composition of what that means and and that we're not thinking about exclusion when we talk about diversity and inclusion, right?
Correct.
So what can you say to that point?
Sure. I think it's a very common misconception. A lot of people think that when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, that means, push all the white people out the room, all the old white men, you hear these terms all the time. And that's actually not what it means at all. Diversity means variety, if you look it up in the dictionary. And what we're trying to promote, support, encourage is allowing more people to be in the room together. So allowing more people to have opportunities. So we don't want the white people to disappear, go away. It's just in a lot of cases, there's predominantly white people in the room. So we're just, talking about letting other people in the room, pushing the seats over, making space for people to also sit at the table who are not white, or other people who, have disabilities, kind of more females. Or whatever gender you identify with, but it's just kind of allowing for more people to be in the room. So it's definitely not about, getting rid of white people.
So that's kind of a lot of assumptions I think people have about who gets to be in there. But similarly, people make a lot of assumptions about what diversity inclusion, who it's targeted towards. And it's really a lot more than just the first knee-jerk reaction, maybe about it's just about race or it's just about gender.
Right. And we're trying to when you embark on a program like this and you're getting people involved, and a lot of people have those misconceptions, the best thing you can do is just really educate people on really what it means and how to think a little bit bigger. So when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, or JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, we're talking about policy. We're talking about people with disabilities, different situations that people go through, different life experiences. People live in different communities. It covers so much more. And if we can have more companies thinking of it in that way, I like to give the example of when a company decides to change their family leave policy to allow for men to take paternity leave when their partner, has a child, that's diversity, because again, it's all about making sure that people have the same opportunity, and that's where equity comes in, right? So that's what diversity is. So it's more than just race and gender. I think race and gender, it's easy to go there. It's like the low-hanging fruit, because you can look across the room and say, okay, it's predominantly male, or it's predominantly female, or it's predominantly white. But really, it's more than that. And I'm really hoping that when, companies embark on this and they start their ERGs, right, their employee resource groups, you're going to get people who look different, right, come from different places, and you may find yourself, oh, I never spoke to this person before, I don't know anything about them, and then you find out you have a lot in common with them, and you thought that probably you were so different than them. So that's really what I want people to think more about when you talk about diversity and inclusion. It's much bigger and broader than race and gender.
I remember before this program started having a couple of conversations around this topic with different people, and a lot of what I heard was, this is great, but we're a business. We do this thing. We're not here to fix the world's problems. But really, this is as much about what's good business as it is about doing the right thing, right?
Right, exactly. I think that as citizens of this country, we all have a responsibility, right? And when we think about our businesses, and especially as marketing individuals and business leaders, there is a huge competitive advantage by having a diverse workforce. We want people to do this for the right reasons because it's important and it is the right thing to do. But when you're looking at it from a business side, it does bring your business to the next level. You have to make sure that your workforce matches the communities that you're working in. When you have a diverse workforce, you have diversity in thought. And you have different perspectives. People are going to bring new ideas to the table, and that's just going to elevate your business. It brings innovation. It brings better talent. You get more productivity from your employees because they feel heard, they feel included. So it's across the board, and studies already show that it's the right thing to do, but it's a huge business incentive for a lot of companies.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Alicia. I think there's so much here to talk about that we'll definitely be returning to some various topics around this initiative.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Here's me with Brian Beaulieu talking about the origin of 312. All right, you are?
I'm Brian Beaulieu.
What's your title here at HRP?
I am the Drafting GIS Manager.
How long have you been with HRP?
In March of next year, it'll be 35 years. I am employee number 16.
And in addition to your many other roles at the company, you also run the Alumni Association?
Yes. So Tad and Dan asked me about almost 2 years ago to run the Alumni Association, and they wanted to put together a way of getting in touch with all the folks that have come through the door over the years. I think I'm not sure how many employees we have now. I know it's over 100, but we've had 500 people come through. So there's a few hundred people out there that we'd like to reach out and and reconnect with. That's what we want to do. We want to create that community again.
What is the origin of 312?
Okay. Well, Tom, back in 1995, HRP moved from New Britain to Plainville onto New Britain Avenue in Plainville, and we just happened to be located a few steps from J. Timothy's.
Plainville, yes. Connecticut. And tell us a little more about what J. Timothy's is.
J. Timothy's is a pub and restaurant.
And if you're not in Connecticut, they are known for having maybe the best wings ever.
Anywhere. Yeah, they have some pretty good wings. Dirt wings, where they sauce them, fry them, sauce them again, fry them again. It's good stuff.
All right. So before we make anyone too hungry, let's jump back into 312.
I reached out to a couple of the guys that I recalled were kind of the founders of 312. And I got two stories. They're kind of similar. The gist of it is, it was a Friday afternoon. One of the guys had just got off a rough call. They decided that they needed to take a walk over to J. Timothy's to take the edge off. There was also some discussion of who could chug a beer quicker. So it was Tom Sedgwick and Doug Pelham. And
what are their respective roles?
Well, they were engineers back then.
And Tom, what does he do now?
Tom is he's kind of the big cheese in New York.
And is Doug still with the company?
No, Doug is an attorney that we use for some of our environmental stuff.
Gotcha.
And there was also a guy that we affectionately refer to as Zeke, Keith Gibran, and he is no longer with the company. But I actually been in touch with him recently about the alumni group. So Zeke is the one that had the rough phone call. Tommy said that he had a call with a client at 3:30. So he said, well, we can go over and have one, and then I have to get back. And of course, he and Doug were the ones that were arguing over who could chug the beer quicker. Mm-hmm. So basically, they went over, and they happened to notice that the time was 3:12. Walked in, had a beer. Doug says he won. I don't doubt that. I've seen Doug chug a beer. He turned around and went back to work. Doug says after we got back, we realized that the rest of the afternoon passed in a most pleasant manner. And actually, Tommy says after our quick beer, we decided we should do it again. So they both say after that, next Friday, 3:12, back over across the street to J. Timothy's, and that's the rest is history. I mean, it became a tradition. They started inviting more and more people, and sometime between 95 and like 98, somewhere around there.
Many 312s ago.
Many 312s ago, yeah. When we moved here to Farmington, the nearest establishment for alcohol is a little bit of a walk. And we've had the good fortune of having a couple young men, you included, who would go out and buy us some pretty darn good beer on Fridays. It doesn't always happen at 312. Sometimes it would, be 412 or whatever, but it's a community thing now.
How would you describe the spirit of 312?
We go in there and it's the end of the week, and you did what you had to do, and it's time to blow off steam. And yeah, that's what makes it great around here is it's just a few friends getting together over beer,
And you get to actually make friends with people who maybe otherwise you never had any real contact with.
Absolutely, yeah.
Get to see a different side of people.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's definitely, it's ingrained in HRP. 312 that's ours. Nobody can touch that. That's HRP.
Here we are again with Sean, Eric, and Garfield, and this time me. So I guess to kick it off, how did everybody here meet? Like, how do you guys all know each other?
I was introduced to Eric through a mutual acquaintance of ours. So I was working with Maurice Chrisman on COVID services and COVID technologies and things like that. And he connected me with Eric many, many, many months ago, thinking May, Eric. And then from there, we started building our relationship and moving things forward there.
Yeah, I joined the Elysian team late summer through one of the other ventures that one of the investment management groups that I was working with got involved with. And through that introduction to Eric and the Elysian team, I began working with Sean and hopefully serving as one of his right-hand men here at Elysian to help deliver and identify and educate his client group on strategies and solutions that can aid them in this fight that we're all fighting. Yeah.
That's a really nice way, Tom, of Eric saying, hey, we got this guy, and he asks so many questions, and he takes up so much of our time that we have to hire somebody and dedicate him to Sean Malin just to keep the phone lines open. Because I just wanted to learn so much. It was just so interesting to me. And I had a lot of questions. And so Garfield fell from the sky, and we've been buddies ever since.
I was introduced to both Sean and Garfield through a multi-decade, dare I say, generational relationship of a group of people working with Garfield. On one side and on the Elysian side, the same thing. These are relationships that go back 20, 30, 40 years. And because of my experience in healthcare with seniors, I was able to kind of join two groups together and bring together what I'll call the magic of our organization, are a combination of incredible people like Sean and Garfield.
Yeah, one of the, I'll touch on something that I think really fortified the relationship that I think Sean and I have developed over the past few months. In all honesty, and I'm not trying to be cheesy or anything, because that's just not me. I'm not a cheesy guy. I actually feel like I've known Sean for probably 5, 10, 15 years, because we were able to connect really quick. The first week of September, actually, he was able to hang a lot of things over my head because his Pittsburgh Steelers demolished my New York Football Giants. And I think that set our glide path to just smooth sailing from that point, I think. No, it's been a pleasure to work with Sean, and I think what we've been able to accomplish in a very short period of time has been incredible. I see from everything that he does on a daily basis, he's just very dedicated to his clients and supporting them. And I and the rest of the Elysian team, we're thrilled to be able to help make that job just a little bit easier.
Garfield, we were probably easier to maintain our friendship because of the access to Zoom and GoToMeeting and Teams, because I think that a lot of my pestering, if it were just phone-based, he'd definitely think I was a huge jerk because of my incessant. And the only reason why he feels like he's known me for 5 or 10 years is because that's how many times a day I call him. and I think that, there have been multiple days where Garfield and I have logged on to yet another webcam call at like 4 o'clock, and we're both shiny and bald, but if we had hair, it would likely be all disheveled. To Eric's point earlier in the podcast about the education, this isn't an easy topic. It's got a lot of nooks and crannies. There's a lot of angles. There's a lot of possibilities for people to solve problems with this. So, it's been really fun working with Garfield, and I think that some of the best calls I think we've had is at the end of the day when we're both very punchy. I can't remember who the client was, Garfield, and of course we can't say, but I remember there being some sort of snafu with the mic, and there was a bunch of feedback, as everybody's experienced throughout the pandemic, right? Somebody calls in with their phone and their computer, and there's this weird echo reverb, and Garfield and I were disconnected for a couple of hours there, but we got on there and we immediately started dancing on the webcam there, which probably wasn't the smart play, but the individual loved it and thought we were pretty humorous there. And for having that be the introduction to such a serious topic, to have these two guys here, kind of gyrating to the reverb of the mic at 4 o'clock because we've had quite a long day was probably something that individual probably still talks about, I would think. What do you think, Garfield?
Well, yeah, and I don't know if this was the same situation, but again, we all have our Zoom GoToMeeting tragedies that hit from time to time, and I remember there was one situation where Eric and I were on back to back conference calls and webinars, and for whatever reason, I had in the middle of one of those webinars a call with Sean and one of Sean's clients, and I couldn't log in, and Sean did his proverbial dance. I don't think he was actually dancing on that particular instance, but he was able to keep the conversation going, and I think I jumped in, and boom, it was as if I might have been 15 minutes late to that call, which is not typical. I like to think that I'm prompt and on time, but I was able to get in just in time to keep things going. But it shows how I think in a very short period of time we have developed a cadence. Eric and I often talk about this with the way he and I work together. there is a cadence in how we do things, and playing off each other. And, sometimes it gets into we are in a really, really serious time, and we have really serious jobs, and we take it extremely seriously. But it's also good to be able to chuckle with folks that you work with. Unfortunately, we're not able to go and sit and have a beer together, but it's almost like we're sitting back and having a beer together because we've built a cadence that allows us to work well and play off each other in delivering a very serious and important message, but break a smile every now and then and help each other, through what sometimes is a tough, challenging day. I think the three of us have been able to do that really, really effectively, and it's resulted in, I think the success that we've had in in providing the right message, the right education, the content, and ultimately delivering solutions that's meaningful to the market.
Yeah, trying to find that work-life balance, trying to strike that. That's a big part of kind of HRP's company culture. I wonder if you guys can talk about how, in your own lives you kind of find a way to strike that balance.
Well, this has been, I'm generally, I wouldn't call myself an introvert. Okay. I tend to be the more outgoing person in my family. But I do love, I have a very tight circle of people I call my friends. And, the last 9 months have been tough, right? Because I love to go out and golf, and, who doesn't like to go to the bar and hang out and go to a restaurant and do that stuff. And it's been tricky to reset, right? And I've got 2 kids, and my wife works a very demanding job, and all 4 of us are in the house, and we're basically punching in the morning, and we're at it. I kid you not, there are days that you would think if you've got 4 people working and living in the same house, that you're going to bump into each other throughout the day. But there are days that go by where it's almost like I kiss my wife goodbye in the morning. We grab our coffees and we go our opposite ways, and we see each other again at 5 o'clock. I kid you not. But yeah, we've had to create new dances to make the most out of these really challenging times. Whether it's, I find that as a family, we sit at the dinner table together a lot more now than we did before. We'll have family dinners, and it's a good opportunity to catch up and hear from the kids and see how they're doing, and work through challenges that they're experiencing.
Yeah, I would say that certainly the last, call it 11 months almost, have been extraordinary. I'm a guy that in the year 2019, I was on 200 different commercial airline flights. And I have been known and ridiculed by my lovely wife that sometimes I sit down at dinner at home and I routinely and automatically reach for my seatbelt because I eat more meals on airplanes than I do at home. And to have not been on an airplane since February 2nd of this year, it is, you talk about a significant change in life, and to have spent about that same number, about 180 nights last year in a Marriott property, and not spent any since January of this year. It's like it's one of the best things that's ever happened in my life. I actually got to know my wife again, and unfortunately she has had to get to know me as well.
Eric, I'm just imagining you having this Pavlovian response in regards to putting your tray table in the upright position after you're done eating, and just flipping the kitchen table night after night.
I haven't flipped the table yet, but I'll guard against that.
But, for me, it's really about finding kind of creative fulfillment during these times, working on my writing outside of work, but then also, being able to really get that sense of creative fulfillment through this podcast, through HRP's YouTube channel, and kind of through it all, working at a company where the coworkers that you have around you really feel like your friends and your family and people you can rely on. It's a really great environment here. Sean, what about you?
Yeah, on the heels of what you just said, obviously we're used to coming to work, right? Environmental consulting, we have office space, we have interactions, we have war rooms and stuff like that, and it's been interesting. Probably more so in the last couple of months because it's been such a duration where if you happen to see somebody in the office, you go into those office space type things when life was normal, right? Where everybody's at the water cooler and you have the fake, right? There's no real emotion coming out of the, hey, how was your weekend, Sean, kind of stuff. And there was an incident yesterday where I saw a coworker that I honestly hadn't seen in months. And it was a different inflection point, like, hey, how you doing? What have you been doing? Blah, 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 blah. And so it's kind of funny. It's been interesting to kind of realize that you miss those relationships of the people that you're in the trenches with every day. On the home front, it's more like, my experience has been more like Eric's, where, we have a client base that has issues all over the country. And I'm probably have sat beside Eric in the Delta, suite, getting my peanuts and stuff, and opening up my laptop and crunching things. And so I have two young kids that that's been the silver lining for me, is to be able to have been home for the last couple of months and really play more of a role in their day-to-day lives as opposed to on the weekends, that kind of stuff. And I think in hindsight, I think that's what I'll think of when I think of the pandemic. Obviously, there's a lot of bad things that I will never forget, but the connection that I'm having with my young kids, whereas if this were a normal year, I'd be here, there, and everywhere. So that's kind of my take on it.
Here's what a 312 conversation sounds like after a long week of hard work. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Play Hard section of the podcast. And my God, do we ever need to play hard, because getting this recording started has been an absolute disaster. We are now into an hour and 15 minutes of trying to figure out how to record something. We have down in Texas. Why don't you introduce yourself, Tex?
Everett.
That's you.
Anderson.
There he is. And
hey, everybody, it's Joe Cardinale.
The Joe Cardinale. And what is everybody drinking? Joe, what do you have?
I got some Bullet Rye whiskey.
Bullet Rye whiskey.
And I've drank a lot more than I expected.
Probably, yeah. It's been one of those Fridays. Everett, what do you have?
I have an Oktoberfest.
Oh, that's cute. It's a little late.
November.
Well, it feels like October all the time down here, so.
All right. And I have switched from Treehouse, one of the fine IPAs of Treehouse, down to a Pabst Blue Ribbon, in keeping with the spirit of today.
Nice.
Absolutely. Now I'm ready for that flavor and aroma of PBR that reminds me of so many misspent nights in my youth.
For me, it was Natty Ice.
Oh yeah, of course. No frat boy house party is complete without plenty of natty daddies lining the floor.
We wallpapered the walls with the boxes.
Oh God! Did you make an American flag out of it?
No.
With the Bud
a
Light
big
and the
wall of Natty Ice.
The Bud Light and the Bud Heavy. I saw people.
That would have been a good idea, but we did not think of that. We were probably too drunk.
That's like peak frat.
Yeah, that would have been smart. I should ask Dave Webster, who was in my fraternity.
Dave Webster was in your
Yeah,
fraternity?
same fraternity.
Wow.
Huh.
Yeah.
Small world.
Are there like black and white photos of you on the walls?
Oh god.
That was good. They were in color.
Okay.
I was less round then. More hair. Big goatee. When I thought that was cool.
Mm-hmm. So this is a kind of a new Friday tradition for us, recording the 312 podcast. Usually 312 is just, at least up here where we're recording in Farmington, we see it expressed as we've been working hard and now it's time to kick back with your coworkers, maybe have a beer if you're so inclined, and get to know each other a little better. So we're hoping that with this section of the podcast, you all out there are going to get to know us a little better and kind of see what we're about outside of the straight-laced, straightforward work that we do. So at the risk of being too formal, let's get back into some of the normal... I actually promised everybody that we weren't going to treat it like this, but anyway, we weren't going to be like, and now,
Introducing...
But I was thinking of something the other day. What is the most obsolete piece of technology that was a part of your life, your childhood? Like, not what was, like, not something that you use now that is obsolete or anachronistic, like a record player or something, but something that feels like it belongs to a different era, but you clearly remember it being part of your life at some point.
Well, should we say, sorry to interrupt, should we say that I'm 45 years old, you're in your 30s, 32, and Everett's in his 20s.
Yeah,
Yes.
21.
just turned
So there's going to be a
26.
good gap there.
21 years old.
Not 21 years old.
How old are you?
23 years old.
26.
26.
See, we're very good friends here.
Yes.
You think I'm 21? I've been here for 5 years. What, 5 years? And
We know you're not 21.
Yeah. One thing I thought of, which I just find hilarious thinking about, is the in school. I know it's not like part of your everyday life, but I'll get there eventually with other things. But like in school, you remember those like overhead projectors where you had you like wrote with like a erasable marker like on a
what were they called?
on a plastic sheet on top of a thing, and then it would project that onto the wall.
Yeah. Oh my god.
The
What
most
the heck were they were called
absolute,
something though?
the most absolute, most ancient tech ever. Can't even call it tech. It's just light. There's no like, it's a light bulb in a box with a mirror. Mm-hmm. But
what do they do now?
I just think it's smart.
It's all smart
boards, and I mean they still use that. Like when I was in like 7th or 8th grade, people were still using those. But I think that might be more. I think that might be more of a teacher preference. Like if you had an older teacher, they might have just kept doing that, because I think an older teacher using a smart board might have been a little daunting of a task.
That's a good one though.
Okay, I have two answers for this, because one of them, the first one is going to give me some perspective on how far removed Everett and I are from each other.
Oh boy.
But when I was a wee lad, I would spend most of my afternoons after school watching the same 4 or 5 movies over and over again on the VCR. Everett, was a VCR ever a part of your childhood?
That's like with like VHS type tapes, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Just that answer tells you.
Well, it's funny because I think it's been so long since I've even heard the word I guess the letters VCR, that I was like, wait, I thought it was called a VHS, but that's just the tape.
Now,
yeah,
I do still have a VCR.
I
have a TV with a VCR and an actual VCR player.
Wow. You need to clean it. Oh, I think we'd all.
I told my wife, it's my wife, says, can't we just convert this to DVD?
Yeah.
Be done with it.
Yeah, my dad had a video recorder that had like you put a VHS tape in it and then recorded. The thing was massive.
The big tape?
Yeah.
The actual
you put the whole thing in the side of it and then you record. He would do it like every Christmas.
That's
probably like bigger than like a 4K camera that like has like, you know, that you can like do sports broadcast, like a broadcast camera, like the big giant ones.
Like a big one.
Yeah, like that's probably how big it was.
He almost needs a stand for it.
Yeah. No, that's a good one though. I mean, that
was a really good one.
My mom had a minivan that had a VHS. Like it was like one of the first ones that had a TV in it.
Oh my god!
And it was VHS. And I watched the same 4 movies. Like it didn't matter if we were going 10 feet or 10 hours. I'd be like, nope, pop it in a movie. I'm watching whatever.
So when I first dated my wife, which was close to 20 years ago, when we had to record shows, there wasn't TiVo or DVRs like they are now. We had to use the VCR. And I remember getting a VCR that had a timer when it could start recording. It was like revolutionary.
So that was my answer to kind of, because I wanted to see how Everett would respond to that. My real answer in terms of like the oldest, most obsolete thing that I was involved with as a kid was I had an electric typewriter, and I used that to do all my writing for a very long time, because for most of my life, a laptop was prohibitively expensive. There's just no way someone's going to have a laptop. And I wanted one so bad. But I had a little electric typewriter instead of that. That broke so easily.
Yeah, I remember my friend had a typewriter, but like we used it like as a toy. Like I'd be like, "Oh, that thing's cool. Let me just like slap around on the keyboard because it was cool to hear the noise." But like we never used it like practically.
Typing butts.
So I can't imagine at like 10 years old I was writing anything too impressive on a typewriter.
That's fair.
Ever just wrote but. What
do you got, Joe?
So the first one that I already was thinking of, beepers.
I have that on my list,
beepers,
actually.
Yeah.
Well, you obviously never had a beeper.
No.
And I still remember, like, the stores that would have the displays of the beepers. It's the stupidest tech that ever came to mind, because if you got a call and you're driving, you have to pull over, find a phone, and then call it back. So, I mean, it was a very stupid piece of tech. But I had 2 of them. So
Nice.
And the other one I thought of when you brought up the overhead projectors, and I was thinking of school. So microfiche.
Microfiche, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No idea what that is. That sounds like an expensive meal.
If you've ever had to write a paper at a college, some of the like really important documents you would need to cite would only be available on microfiche.
And they're basically like, I mean, you used to have to use a light or a screen to be able to view them. But there were old articles from way back that you only could use this piece of tech to do it.
What even is it?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's its own thing. I don't even know what it is.
It was dumb.
Yeah.
If you watch old 80s movies, you might see sometime them using it. But you had to use this big projector machine. And you'd have these sheets. It was like plastic.
Yeah.
And you would have to put it on the light and flash it up into the screen. Mm-hmm. It was stupid.
I remember doing a lot of research when I was in college for that, and then trying to find.
And those machines were enormous.
Trying to find the MLA citation for microfiche. And I was like, forget this. I'll use a different source. There's no way. Oh my gosh, you guys watch Mandalorian?
Not
the
new one that came out today.
I haven't seen the new one either.
Yeah, I watched it this morning.
Yeah, don't ruin it.
I'm not going to ruin it.
What do you think overall so far?
Too much.
Of season 2 or in general of both
That's
seasons?
a good question.
Ooh, season 2. I think, okay, first let's get, what did everyone think of season 1? Joe?
Fantastic. Beginning, the first couple episodes, the last couple episodes. Middle episodes, filler episodes. But as an overall arc...
Every TV show is like that.
I know, but you would expect something like Mando...
It's a uniquely episodic when everything now is very much serialized.
Right.
Yeah. I like the first season.
Yeah.
I think it's clearly how to do Star Wars correctly.
So the reason I liked season 1 so much is because they kind of went back to the roots of Star Wars, like why I liked it in the first place, the original trilogy. Like it feels very it feels like it could have been filmed then. Obviously, it's not because of how good it looks and all that stuff, but it feels very grounded to the fact that it's like, this is where Star Wars started. Like, this is what it is in terms of like how it looks, the people in it, but at the same time, it references things that are new. Like, it references things that are in, you know, the animated shows, or, you know, even stuff from the new trilogy, I guess, but not much. But it just, they do a lot of fan service.
I mean, I'm not a huge Western fan, but I really do like the Western aspect of it. Especially the first episode of season 2 was basically a Western. I mean, it was great.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is, like, story structure wise, we're so used to things being a single story across other episodes, is that when you do something that is interconnected but separate stories, like, your brain doesn't know how to process it, right? Like, what Mandalorian needs to do is teach us how to watch the show, and I feel like it's not doing enough of that. Right. So your expectations are mismatched with what's happening. You can't keep up with the pacing of the story, and so your first watch through, it's like, oh, I didn't think it was going to end there. Like, why aren't we doing more? But there's nothing wrong with the actual structure. It's just that your expectations now are so much different.
Totally, especially.
Well, I think the problem too is they keep changing the duration of the episodes.
Didn't you say this? The latest one that we haven't watched, Joe and I.
Yeah, the one that just came out this morning was 35 minutes long.
What's going on there? What decade do you associate with Star Wars?
80s.
Yeah.
Ever?
Yes.
For me, I always associated with the 70s.
Just because it's
pretty much only one movie was in the 70s.
And barely.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, the only
78, I think.
78?
The only reason I would associate it with the 70s is because, like, that's when Star Wars started. So then you're like, Star Wars was made in the 70s. So that's, like, I understand that.
Should we get out of here? All right, let's get out of here.
I'll see you guys.
We need a cool sign up.
Yeah. Signing off from the Nerdios. So what is 312 really about? It's more than just a beer with your friends on Friday. It's about bringing everyone together. It looks different in every office, but it's the same spirit. What makes HRP is more than just how hard we work. It's the unique mix of personalities and people. There's no other company in this industry with the color and character of HRP. All of that comes together at 312. Whether it's a Friday beer in Connecticut, a barbecue in New York, going out for steaks in Missouri. HRP can be a loose idea as a company, but our culture is the common thread for every office. In the business world, culture is talked about as a business imperative. Everyone wants to know how to create it, but HRP has always had it. Our company was founded on the work hard, play hard concept. 312 harnesses that concept in unique language. The story of 312 is a work hard, play hard story. It wasn't just work and it wasn't just play, it was both. That's HRP's culture in a nutshell. At HRP, we don't say we have culture, we say we have 312. Thanks for joining us on this first episode. Keep an eye on this feed and on HRP's official YouTube channel for a new episode of the podcast, the last Wednesday of each month. The 312 Podcast is produced by me, Tom Simmons, with account assistance from Everett Anderson.
Hey everybody, thanks for checking us out. Remember to like, subscribe, look at the links below. Doesn't take too much to do it. Glad to see you. Join us for looking at what our services are, what we provide. Got a lot more coming the way. We're going to have a lot of fun. Stay tuned.